And hey, here we are with Dr. Kazlow, also known as Dr. K, at the Healing Mastery Summit. Welcome, Dr. K. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited that we're getting to do this talk.
Same here, because I knew a little bit about you, but after reading your bio, it's kind of like, whoa, okay, you got a huge resume here, and they're going to get a lot of value, I can tell, because for those of you that don't know, you have spearheaded a transformational process, an integrative approach to mind-body healing and performance, and you actually founded the first integrative therapy holistic center based in New York City. This was over 35 years ago, roughly, right?
Yeah, roughly. It was over that.
So you've been doing this for 35 years. You're a licensed clinical psychotherapist, speaker, author, and you got your doctorate from Columbia University. So you did intensive postgraduate studies of various approaches to psychotherapy, mind-body healing, nutrition, trauma, high performance. And so your global work with over 10,000 people in psychotherapy, mentoring programs. So the list goes on and on. You've been featured on numerous national media, right? ABC News, New York Times. So, and I'm just giving like a very short synopsis. And for those that are watching, you also get a free resource here from Dr. Kazlow, and maybe we'll share a little bit more of that later. And then hopefully we're going to get into an exercise for those listening that will help you create some shifts in, and maybe you could explain a little bit more about this later, but this will happen here. So before we get into all that, just a couple of questions of how did you get interested in where did your journey start when it came into mind, body, spirit healing and transformational coaching?
Well, I was the poster child for modern medicine gone wrong. Okay. So it actually started with a drug my mother took before I was even born. And I was sick my whole life. I was sick as early as I can remember. And starting at age 18, I was told I was gonna die, might die, could die, or should have died more times than I like to count. So it's not to say that there aren't good things in modern medicine. I had a very serious accident a while ago, and the surgeons put me back together. But I have to really say that if I hadn't had 20 plus years of cortisone, they might not have had to put me back together. I might not have been hurt at all. And if I was, I'm sure it wouldn't have been as serious as it was.
Yeah.
So the docs put me together. That was really awesome. But what it didn't do was it didn't give me my ability to walk. I barely walked for 3 years. My mobility was really trashed. My arm was like this.
Yeah.
And they offered to operate and get it like this. Did you even see that? Like barely there, another 10%. So they didn't give me and you can see it's not there anymore. Yeah. So I couldn't walk. I did steps literally on my butt or using my arms. That was not a pretty sight, I've got to tell you. And my pain was crazy. They didn't do anything for my pain or my energy, my ability to live really fully. So, but they did put my body back. And there are times that modern medicine does help. But my earliest memories included being sick. Sick, infections, super bad allergies, and lots of drugs.
So you were put here on this earth to help others.
I was it couldn't have been a more perfect path for what I'm here to do, and so many different levels and so many different dimensions of it. So throughout childhood, I was on constant, remember those pink antibiotics that they used to give kids, like disgusting cherry tasting? Kind of lived on those. And by the time I was in elementary school, it was shots, Benadryl in a flask. Well, it wasn't really a flask, but it was an unmarked bottle that the allergist gave me to sip throughout the day. Yeah, yikes. Then there was this little pill, not quite red, kind of reddish brown pill that had cortisone and antihistamine. Wow, that took away symptoms. It was eventually taken off the market, but not after I was on it for years. And then they gave me Ritalin to keep me awake because the Benadryl that I was drinking all day long.
Oh my God.
Made me sleepy. So
I thought my story was a little harsh.
Yeah, so it was definitely pretty crazy. And on top of that, if you could picture this little girl, because I was kind of a little kid, I would sit in classes. I got all these shots that really hurt. They gave me screaming headaches. And I would sit in class for days after my shots, which were weekly or sometimes bi-weekly. Did you have in school those brown paper towels?
Oh, yeah.
The ones that kind of smell when they're wet?
Yep, I remember those.
So I used to sit with my arms wrapped in those towels after shot days for like a day or two because my arms were heavy, hot. I could barely move them to take notes. It was not a pretty picture. So that was kind of what I did until I was old enough to get away with saying, I'm done. I'm
Yeah,
done. And really look for ways to start to heal instead of just drugging my symptoms, which were getting worse. And so the final straw that affirmed, I was already on my healing journey, but the final straw was, I mentioned earlier that my mother had taken a drug that created issues, and pretty much lifelong issues.
mhm,
And so I had years of, pain and surgeries and all kinds of stuff. And at one point, I was having a really hard time, and I went to a lot of different doctors, and no two could agree on which organ to take out of my body.
mm, yeah,
So I was kind of like, I don't think so. And I finally found myself sitting across big desk, little doctor, this one who was the head of a department at a major New York City hospital. And she said very calmly and with a straight face, she said, well, you won't live through surgery. So go get well, come back, and then we'll open you up and see what's wrong. Crazy, right? Crazy.
that's
But the
ex-
craziest part was that she didn't even realize how crazy she sounded,
right.
right? She was the head of this department and she just said it straight, go get well, come back and then we'll open you up. I don't think so.
Yep.
But that was the best bad advice I ever got because it really affirmed that I was on the right path. I
Hmm.
mean, even she said it, go get well.
Yep.
Go get well. So we left off the last part. So that was, there've been a lot of stages to this journey, but it began very, very early for me.
So, well, when you say, the next question I was going to ask is, how do you come to focus on trauma? It sounds like your childhood was traumatizing. Like you had, I mean, those things people, they think about, I'm like, oh yeah, that was just like what I went through. But there's a lot of trauma that comes with those things that you're talking about. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, they definitely. I always say that my background, I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist as well as, doing all this other stuff in business and helping people to really live on purpose.
Right.
Um, and I always say you don't become a therapist if you had a charmed life. I don't know what you do something else, but it's not therapy. So there was a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And I also say, as you know, from what you do, big teachers, big lessons.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think that the best of us do is we take those lessons and we really use them in the process of our growth. People laugh when I tell this story, but when I had the night that I had the accident that I had that created so much additional trauma, I was taken to a local hospital and then I was moved to a trauma center.
Right.
And one of the things that was interesting was that to me, it was interesting. I'm lying there drugged up, like all this kind of stuff, delirious. And I'm lying on the gurney in the hallway, waiting for a room. And I'm talking to the nurses and the doctors about how I'm going to use this to heal me and the people I worked with. So it was so ingrained in me that even in my delirium, the doctors and nurses are coming. I think they're like, we have to see this lady. Like, who is this? What is going on here? Because I was clearly drugged to the gills and talking about how am I going to, and I had no clue at that point that it was going to be a journey that was going to lead to 8 surgeries in the next 10 years or, any of the kind of things that followed.
Yeah.
But even so, that was the first place I went was how am I going to use this?
That's a beautiful point because I think one of the biggest things that anybody listening can take away is that there is a gift in their disease or in their trauma or whatever it is, and that they can actually use that to be one of the best parts of their life, right?
Yeah, and I always say that I don't know. Some people say that these things are predestined. They happen for a reason. I don't know if they happen for a reason or we get to choose the reason that we're going to give them. When I got hurt, everybody wanted to put the reason as being that I actually slipped. They said the impact was like a car accident, which I think was thanks to the cortisone. But I actually slipped on an icy speed bump. And people tried to tell me that it was God telling me to slow up. And I said, God didn't call it a slow up bump. So it's either a speed up bump, get with the program, or there were many things to learn. And the interesting thing to me is that while I don't want to live my life identified by that,
Yeah.
what I do know is that every year I have learned something new that has come out of that experience. Because it's still parts of it. I still have pain. I still deal with issues from it. But in reflection, as well as in the current coping of it. So I want to answer your question a little bit more too about trauma and like, why did I focus on trauma?
Yeah.
And I focused on trauma because I saw so much that it was a doorway that you couldn't avoid going through if you wanted to really accomplish your purpose.
So true. Yeah.
Right? You just couldn't. And there's so many people out there today trying to do that. I mean, one of the issues that I have with so much of the mindset coaching and even the coaching is that in trying to get away from therapy and with the best of intentions, they've left out dealing with what they call the darker feelings, which are fuel as much as anything else. They're huge. They're important.
Yeah.
We don't deal with the trauma. And so when you try and just do the mind without focusing on the trauma, without focusing on healing, without looking at your demons and not getting rid of them. But I like to talk about dancing with them, really dancing with your demons, because they're going to be the partners, the dance partners that enable you to accomplish either what you were born to or what you choose to do in this lifetime.
Yeah. So how can you give an example of dancing with the demons?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest ways that I look at dancing with the demons is that so many people try and shove them under the rug. Right. And I want to actually talk about this because it's really important. It's something high performers do a lot, and they have a special brand of it. But we're all taught to kind of, suck it up, get strong. Those are the expressions, and they have a visual. If you think about suck it up, what happens? My shoulders go up. I kind of get into a contraction.
Yes.
But if you think about dancing with your demons, it's kind of playful. And so one of the things that I do is always talk about reframing and looking for like the turn. One of my clients said to me just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, she was telling me about something. She's a designer and has some amazing visions of what she's going to do. And I said to her, wow, I can see you doing a TED Talk. And she said, you'll have to medicate me. And I said, actually, we'll have to unmedicate you.
Yeah.
And she laughed and she said, one of the things I love best about you, Dr. K, is that you take everything I say and you turn it around. And so if we take our demons and we look a little bit more closely, a little more playfully, we look with a different lens, we're going to find the solution to what we're struggling with in our demons. So that our problems hold the solutions right there within them. If we can shift our lens, if we can shift our state so that we're coming with different eyes, with a different body, with a different perspective. It's here. And it's in the unconscious. It's like that partnership between the conscious and the unconscious. And right now, most of our lives are being run by our unconscious. And I know some of the speakers in this summit speak to that beautifully. So one of the things I want to do is get that partnership going so that you can access other possibilities. My work is all about shattering limitations, which really come from the way we see the world, the way we're wired up, the way we perceive the world, so that we can function from a world of infinite possibilities. And I'm blessed that I'm one of those people, and I've tried to make it a little more playful, but if you tell me something can't be done, my response is going to be, watch me. And to do that with playfulness, to do that with openness, to do that with learning to change your lens and change your state at will. The cool thing is that everybody can learn to do that.
So that's a good point about trauma. Basically, what you were saying is that this lady thought she needed to be medicated to get on a TEDx talk, but really she needed to be removing the unconscious garbage that was in her mind and basically reprogramming, reframing it so that she's able to do it. And
in her body as well. And in her body as well.
In her body. So here's the question with trauma. I have a coach that says trauma is what puts you to sleep and trauma what wakes you up. So the traumatized are basically walking in a hypnotic stupor if they have not had an traumatic awakening a moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I talk about it as what the trauma does is it can lead us to go into trances.
Right.
Okay? Because what happens is people talk about belief and ideas and stuff like that. And so the ideas are one level. Then we get that level of belief from which we frame our stories, from
Yes.
which we get locked into our into our trances. And if you think about a trance, it's that narrow focus.
Yes.
So I have a friend who he's deceased, but his mom, who's also deceased, used to say that first we make it up, then we believe it. And I always added, and then we create our life to prove that it's true.
That is beautiful. And I have a little like kind of a question that might be a little off, like a curveball here. And that is, if there's a bunch of traumatized people walking around, and the science of brainwashing is getting better and better, is there a lot of people walking around just focusing on like just like the evening news, and they're getting programmed way easier than if someone has their, like, they're not traumatized?
Yeah, well, if you're traumatized, so I want to say you have a trauma, and then I think it's a great distinction whether or not you're traumatized or whether you come out of the trauma, you've gone through the healing, because we all have traumas. And to me, traumas are like those big things, or they're also little things that somebody else might not even react to, and it really has affected you because of who you are and how you're wired up. So I think this is huge and something that I'm focusing on a lot.
Yeah.
I think that we are divided. I think we're being brainwashed. I think we're being separated. I do want to address some of that because I think it's a huge issue. And if we are awake, if we're aware, if we're in our bodies, if we're in a certain state, if we're owning our state, if we actually take ownership of our state, we can't be brainwashed. But if we hand over our state, and it happens in a moment, the more we heal our traumas, the more we learn to master our state, the more we dance with our demons, the more we are not in a state where we can be taken over like that. And it's very subtle. So you may see it, I may see it, and I can look around and people just nod their head like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I'm listening and it's terrifying.
Right.
So one of my missions is to be part of that awakening, getting people out of there, to really own their to own their state, get out of the trances, to heal those traumas so that they can really be very present and making decisions. Right now, we're not making decisions. They're kind of being made in another plane of existence for us.
There's more reaction.
Right. And that's not even to be woo. It's just like there's another part of us, our unconscious is running things.
Yeah.
And true, we don't always need like our most creative self. I don't need my most creative self to get up, go to the bathroom and brush my teeth.
Right.
However, I do need more access to that, to not be taken over and to really do the work I'm here to do in the world.
Yeah. And you say like not to be woo-woo, but this is like, they have a science of trauma-based mind control, right? So this isn't woo-woo at all. This is like, they know that you go into these states and you can actually alter someone's personality, correct?
Yeah, we're watching it all around. I mean, you know, the truth is trance is a naturalistic phenomena. And so trance can be a good thing. Sometimes we just trance out, relax. Trance can be used in good hypnosis. Trance can be these locked in spaces, but trance can be used. There is no value judgment. If you know how to do trance, I've watched some people over different times, and I don't want to go into certain people that are very renowned, but I have watched them on the stage and sat there. And we're going back even, you know, decades, like when I was just out of college and stuff. And I could sit, oh my God, they are putting 3,000 people in trance. They are putting the world in trance. And I would watch how they did it. If you're good at it, if you're studied at it, the possibilities for healing, and it can be done wordlessly. One of the most amazing things I ever saw was Ernest Rossi, who's a brilliant hypnotherapist. I watched him take a woman whose hands were gnarled. And within a few minutes on a stage, without speaking, got her hands opened.
Wow.
Yeah, got her hands opened. It was amazing. And I actually had a student of mine, when my arm was like this, I couldn't sustain it until later. But shortly after I was injured, I had my student do something with his body that mine would follow. And my arm, you can see it's almost perfect. It's not quite perfect, but we got it straightened before froze back, and before I learned and did certain things holistically to get it to move. So yeah, trance is not, it doesn't have the judgment. You know what to do. It's up to us to not only, people are giving all of these kinds of vaccines that we have some questions about, right?
Yeah.
But we need to vaccinate ourselves in a good way. We need to vaccinate ourselves so that we're not going to get inoculated by these things that you're talking about, and then to help others, because our state is contagious.
Yes.
And so that's really key. The more we heal, the more we're in a state. One of the ways that we master our neurological state is through co-regulation with others.
Right.
And so the more that we are in a harmonious, powerful, present state, the more that is going to affect.
And one person at a time.
One person at a time.
Yeah. So, we're talking now about trauma, but overall, you take an integrative approach. Can you just explain like what that means, the integrative approach? Because I think some people don't fully understand what that means, and then why it's so important.
Okay. So an integrative approach means that we're looking at mind, body, spirit, and then we're looking at many ways to approach mind, body, spirit. Everybody likes to get on there, it's kind of, not everybody, but a lot of people get on there. You have to look at this, all you need is nutrition, or all you need is therapy, or all you need are drugs.
Right.
Truth is that while I don't think we need drugs very often, sometimes we do, but not very often, that we do need to address the whole person. And we need to not only address the whole person, we need to do it in ways that work for them. So there can be ways that are brilliant. So let's say meditation. And I know Dr. Dispenza is speaking. He's amazing. Yeah. But not everybody is going to meditate. It's not going to be the approach for everybody, and not everybody's going to do it. But everybody does need things that address the mental, emotional, the what I call somatic, or the body, the spirit, that larger relational field that we're part of. And if you don't do that, you're going to really self-limit the results that you can get. And one of the ways that I learned it, besides myself, was I had my center, and my husband, who's an acupuncturist, and I noticed something very interesting. And we noticed that when we worked with patients, so he would work with a patient, let's take an easy one, back pain. Yeah. And he's a really good healer, and he'd work with back pain and they'd get better. And, acupuncture, the kind he does, goes deep. So it's not even just that he worked on the pain, but it's mind, body, spirit. Yeah. What he'd find is that after a bit, pain would come back if they hadn't healed their trauma. I would work with somebody on, let's say, self-confidence, and they would get more confident. But if they were still walking around like this, bent over, their brain was getting this feedback loop that was reinforcing the energetic patterns of lack of confidence. Yes. So he found, like, if I sent that person with a back pain and you dealt with their traumas, now they're really different. If I took the person and sent them to him to work on these deep patterns and get their body straightened out. And we used to joke that you could tell the difference from people sitting in the waiting room with who worked with both of us and who worked with one of us. You could just see something that was emitted. And I was very blessed because I had two really cool things. One is I got a lot of referrals from doctors. So that gave me a lot of experience really researching and practicing and seeing what worked and what didn't. And then there was an very advanced doctor in New York who, his assistant heard me on the radio, and he invited me to have an office in his Park Avenue office for years. Nice. And so this was amazing because what he did was he worked closely with me and through me with my husband with his patients. And his patients, he understood the value of nutrition as the first start. He was writing about it. People were making fun of him, but he knew the value of therapy and trauma. So he had patients that were high-risk, patients for high-risk pregnancies, infertility, severe endometriosis and PMS. And so we got to really work together and to see. So this went back, we're talking about the 80s. Okay, this went back to the 80s. When I opened my center, it was kind of like voodoo, and people really did not get it. And my mother would send me these articles when somebody would write something that said acupuncture works. Now we kind of go mind, body, healing, of course. But back then it was like, woo, it really was woo. So I was very blessed to get to experiment, to collaborate with chiropractors, to collaborate with medical doctors, to collaborate with my husband closely, who's an acupuncturist, different kinds of therapy. because different therapies, some of them didn't address the body at all, and some of them addressed the body, but they didn't deal with people's resistance in other ways. So I studied in depth many different forms to put together an approach that was one integrated. And I always say I don't have a formula. I have guidelines, I have an approach, and then it has to be customized.
Right.
To who's in front of you. So
you can't
general things.
Yeah, everybody's different, right? So if they come to you and they have certain areas that need focus, they might need to start with a different technique, correct?
And different ways of even just talking to them.
Yeah.
You know, and people don't.
Based on their feedback to you on how they talk, correct?
It's like I had a physical therapist after my accident, and I had chosen her because she was more holistic. She did some energetic healing work, but she didn't know how to talk to me. One of the very first sessions we had, she said to me, now you just knowing me a little bit, no, this was not a good thing. And I bet our listeners are going to know that too. So she said to me, she said, Dr. K, she said, you are going to have to exercise every day for the rest of your life. Now, am I somebody who likes being told what I have to do?
I don't think anybody is.
No, most people don't. Some people it worked on. She had a really long following. I had to wait to get in to see her.
Oh, wow.
Some of us were like, no. And so if she had known to like listen differently, to approach, some people like that. You have to do this, you have to do that. And
that's true.
They do, and they thrive that way. That's not me, but they do thrive that way.
Right.
But that's definitely not me. But if she had just talked to me in a different way and said, you know, would you like to know what I recommend? I would have said, sure. I waited like a long time to come, not a long time, but months to come see you. Sure, I'd like to know what it is you recommend.
Yeah.
You know, if she had asked me what I thought about exercising every day for the rest of my life.
Right.
So it's really interesting. So it's the approach, it's the mind, it's the body, it's nutrition. For some people, it's more important than other people. I've had a lot of people that if you don't get them to supplement, you got to be really careful with diet because some people rail against it, but helping them to change their diet so it's less inflammatory. I mean, to work, we know depression now. We kind of did it by the seat of our pants. We knew probiotics were making a difference. Now we can say, if you don't have this strain of bacteria, you're more likely to be depressed.
Right.
But you have to know, especially with nutrition and food, that brings up trauma, attachment issues. So working with that is another thing that you have to dance with.
Yes.
And then I have found that people, without getting proper supplementation, you can often give them the best of the best, and they simply don't have, especially with the depletion in our food and our soul, all that kind of stuff, they don't have what they need.
Right, so not getting B vitamins or the magnesium, etc.
I've had people, in fact, I took a supplement when I was struggling to get back to myself that I thought was going to help my pain. And I did have supplements that made a huge difference in walking and pain, but I took one that I was sure it was focused on epigenetics, that it was going to help my pain. Well, eventually it did. But what it did first was it gave me my sense of self back, which was a shock to me. It was like, oh my God, I hadn't realized how far off, because all of a sudden within 2 weeks, I'm back. Now, I've seen that happen with patients, with clients. I kind of call patients the people who come in for therapy and then clients, but you know, so you'll hear me make that distinction. But I work with patients or clients like that. You give them what they need.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they have the energy within them to be able to do what they really want to do. And they just haven't been able to do it.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. So you say trauma and our demons are key to evolving our identity and consciously creating our reality. So, for example, when someone's coming into you, and in your example, when you went to this doctor, that was actually resistance, right? Because she told you one thing, and so it wasn't really helping you on your path. But if you actually open somebody up to, or make them conscious of what they enjoy, what they love, and then infuse the healing process with that, then you're more likely to get a result, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And people do the opposite. People kind of pound each other. Even with mindset, you have to change your mindset. You have to eat right. You have to do all of these things. Yeah. And the truth is, what you really need to do is listen to the person.
Right.
Partner with them.
Yeah.
Such a key, just what you've said is just, it's so simple And it's so brilliant. Sorry. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people come in and we're tricky. We're kind of protecting this soft spot that we have.
Mhm.
So people will come in and they'll bring a problem. So let's say into my business mentoring, they'll bring a problem. They'll say, whatever I do, I just can't build my business past a certain amount.
Right.
Now, if you're not really paying attention, you will follow them down a certain path. And high performers are really good. We talk about hypnosis. They get you to follow their trance. If you're not really in your own space, in your own clarity, man, they just get you right down there. So they'll bring that. The truth is that it's usually something underneath that. So for example, it may be a health issue that they're afraid their health won't sustain them if their business is bigger. Or they'll make their brother feel bad because they're more successful.
Right.
So if you go deeper, there's always a disconnection. And you want to find the connection, but generally doing it by hitting somebody over the head isn't the way to do it. It's going in another doorway. It's supporting the positive resources. There are people that are coming to me or coming to you or out in the world. They're really good at the negative. We've already got the obstacles down really well.
Yeah.
And most people have resources to a certain point. But what they don't have is the resources to get to that next stage. And sometimes the resources trip you up. Like high performers are really good at using trauma. They're really good at compartmentalizing or using it as fuel. But they're not good at getting to that next step of transformation. Because I talk about difference between healing and transformation. When they want something bigger, it will get them to a certain point, and then they get stuck. They burn out. They lose their juice. Something happens. And I mean, I get it. I've something I work with, and so that's exactly what you want to look at.
So let's maybe give a little exercise now, where the what you were telling me about before, where you can help people kind of just you explain it and kind of go into it.
Okay, so this is fun, and not only is it fun, we're going to go through it. I'm going to ask people to do it with us. You can actually do this even if you're driving, because I know a lot of people listen when driving. So just stay really present, okay? Make sure if you're driving, you're not kind of trancing out. You have to alter it a little bit if you're driving. So use common sense when you do that. But if they go to my website, you have my website listed. Okay, this is a free download. They can get it right at my website. So let's do it now. Don't pay attention to memorizing it. I call it the Kazlow anchor. And I love it because to me, it means like the jig is kind of up. It's like if you're willing to do this, you can change your state on the spot. Now, does it mean, people always ask me, so I don't have to really go into the trauma or that negative stuff? No, it doesn't mean that. I mean, you don't have to. Nobody's going to make you do that. That's really a choice, right?
Yeah.
But it's not going to be it's not going to bring the same kind of openness, transformative power, or be your default. But this is something that you can use. And if you are somebody who wants to go deeper, I'm somebody who gets to the next level and it's like, okay, what's that next level of personal growth and service? If you're one of those people that want to get to that next level, this will be something that's part of that process. So what you want to do is take your hand and, if you're driving, you can just imagine your hand there, but take your hand, put it in the center. Now, actually, before you even do that, what I'd like you to do is to think about something. And, I'd like you to do it along with us too, because I'm glad you started to do that. Think of something distressing. Now, don't make it the biggest thing in your life, okay? Because we're just doing it the first time. Something that disturbs you. Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how disturbing is it?
For me, I would say 5, 6.
Okay, can you get something that gets you a little bit 7, 8?
Okay.
Or even that, but just let it ramp up. Let it kind of fill you instead of shutting it off, right? Because I can see it. I can see how you're holding it. You could kind of let it.
Okay, I've got it.
So think about something, those of you listening, think about something that's distressing. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it disturb you? And again, don't pick the biggest thing, just pick about something that's significant to you. Put your hands in the center of your chest, and I want you to look at your hand. And I want you to look at it with soft eyes. So that means that you're not staring at your hand, you're not with your eyes looking up to the right, to the left, down, you're just looking at your hand. And while you're looking at your hand, I want you to breathe. So no cheating, okay? You got to breathe, and you've got to keep looking at your hand and listen to the sounds in the room. If the room is silent, listen to the silence in the room. I'm in a room that's above, like about a quarter of a mile off a highway. I can hear the traffic in the background, and I'm kind of listening to that. So listen to the room, hear the silence. And if you're not driving, because you can't do this with two hands, you can actually take your other hand and put it on your thigh, dropping you deeper into your body. And just look at your hand, keep your eyes soft. Okay, couple of seconds. So Ian, when you think, and those of you listening, when you think back on that distressing thought, and actually you can even pay attention, I didn't ask you to do this, to what it was doing in your body, what your body felt like. This will all be on the website.
Yeah.
What's it now? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it disturb you now?
Yeah, I just feel like it calmed me down, and I could actually feel like, because of my issues, I am like super like aware of my body, and I could actually feel it triggering brain centers.
And you look different. For those, for people that can see you, you really are looking different now from it was just a few seconds. So can you feel how your state shifted?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could literally feel the brain centers open up. Like, if I had to guess, it was like in my prefrontal cortex, and it just triggered a different state of awareness.
Yeah, it literally takes about, and when you do it, you can literally do it like that. Okay? Yeah. And I do it, to be really honest, I do it on stage. Do I put my hand here on stage sometimes? Sometimes, nobody knows why. Other times I just think about my hand on stage. I just shift my eyes. I soften my gaze before I look back to the audience. I can shift out of anxiety and right into being present. So it doesn't matter what the trauma is. People always say, I can't feel good until blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you can feel good if you choose to.
Right.
You can feel good anytime if you choose to. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever feel sad, angry, grieving, fear, all of those emotions. One, they're part of life. So you want them to move through you. You don't want them to be stuck in you, but they want you to give the richness of life. And there's also information. So if you're fearful, what's that fear about?
Yeah.
Okay, what can I learn from that fear as it moves through me? If I'm grieving, but it's about being stuck. So that shifted. So what I love about this is, one of the things that I do is I give workshops to teach people to take ownership of their state.
Yeah.
To really master their state. And some people do it and they come in and they'll apply it to business. People who are coaches or consultants or health professionals will use it in their practice. People use it in their lives. I have workshops especially for people who say, I want to make a difference in my relationships, in my own health, in my kids' health. So owning your state is huge. Yeah. And you could go whatever level you want to go with that.
So in terms of the science behind that, is that triggering the alpha brain waves?
I think it's going to be different. It's going to be different for different people. Same as we're finding out now that different types of meditation triggers different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
One of the things that I haven't hooked them up, it'd be fun to talk to Dr. Joe about this. One of the things that I see and read energetically is that depending on how they're wired up, depends on how often a lot of people use trance a lot. They're used to going into hypnosis. They're used to meditating. They're going to experience it differently than somebody that has been very much operating, in that very conscious, very controlled, or somebody who's in a fight-flight pattern a lot of the time, as opposed to more of the parasympathetic ventral, which is that harmonious state. So it also depends what you think about. If you think about something that is from different, I would bet the different times, how long ago, different times, different, even that they're finding out now that with the DNA, that we're transferring trauma down in our DNA. Yeah. So that almost makes me feel as a mom that we have an obligation, and as somebody here to serve in the world, to clear these things out of us so that we don't pass them down. I
totally agree. And that's what I think most people don't realize when you speak to them, is that their state of awareness is changing their genetics, their DNA, and then those memories are actually being passed on. So we have an obligation to everybody around us to actually be the best we can be.
Yeah, because we're influencing, it's like those molecules. We're influencing people we touch, we're influencing our family, we're influencing our friends, we're influencing the planet.
Right.
You know, when people say, oh, plants die around me, right? Some people say, oh, plants just die around me. You
Yeah.
have to wonder, what is it
Yeah.
that's going on? What is it in the field, in that energetic field? Because our state, really, in our state, we're transmitting a vibration.
Yeah.
We're those vibrational beings. So you want to shift that state so that you shift your vibration. So one, you create your life, your business, your purpose, your relationships, your health. What's
Yeah.
amazing to me is how that can really shift. So sometimes it shifts so quickly.
Yeah.
Now, as I say, some people want to go more. Other people, it's a slow process. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
But what's been amazing to me is to see how sometimes, you know, when people talk about spontaneous healings,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what is that about? It's about they literally become a different person.
Yeah.
When you look at people who have multiple personality disorder,
Yeah.
right? And they have different health histories. They have different menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
Literally are functioning like different beings.
Yeah. And to give an example of that real quick, because I think this is interesting for the listeners, like you're talking about someone will be a specific personality and they'll have psoriasis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll switch over to a different personality and the psoriasis is gone.
Okay, can I tell you my own little story about that? I'm not
Yeah.
multiple personality disorder, although maybe my family could sometimes wonder, but basically no. But I have an interesting story about your state and something that I saw. So I grew up very allergic, got through most of my allergies. There's a couple, and some of them are like bad, like mold. I'm sensitive. That's not really an allergy, but there's a few that I've struggled with. But one that was very interesting that gave me a whole different spin on what allergy and dis-ease really is. Mm-hmm. So I was very, very, very allergic to mascara. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know it for a long time. All I knew is that as I would finish up work and be ready to go to graduate school and I'd get my makeup on, I didn't put anything together. I thought I was tired. I was hungry. I was getting headaches. And I was, you know, a kid at the time when we didn't wear a lot of makeup and there was a lot of hippie stuff. So didn't wear a lot of makeup. Yeah. But I didn't put these two together until one day I was putting the wand to my eyes and I started to feel funny. So I struggled. I found that I could wear some mascaras without preservatives, but nobody wanted to make those for very long because they were afraid of getting sued.
Yeah.
And one day I noticed that I would put on mascara sometimes anyway, allergic or not. And what was interesting is that I found that whenever I was teaching, I was not allergic to mascara. Uh-huh. No allergy whatsoever. And it didn't matter whether I taught for an hour or whether I taught 3 days in a row for 10 hours or 12 hours. As long as I was teaching and for as long as it would take me to get home. Yeah. No swelling, no headache, no nothing. A little bit of red eye maybe, but basically nothing. So I came to realize that my state, it wasn't really about allergy to mascara. It was about my state. And so I started practicing and teaching my clients to do this, changing my state so that I could wear the mascara. Do I wear it all the time? No. But do I wear it? Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing. So mascara can seem like a trivial thing, but it's an example. Yeah, it's a representative. It's representative of illness, of, you know, being out in the world, of my client who said, you'll have to medicate me to be on stage. It's like, no, we just have to change your state. Yeah. And then you literally become someone else. So how long does it take to master that? Are you saying that someone can learn that just like how we did the anchor right now? Okay, so I'm saying it depends. Famous answer, right? It depends on, you know, a lot of people have like all of a sudden their business is great after years of building it, or all of a sudden they'll master something after years of working on it, but it looks like they did it in a minute. So generally, a lot of people who experience that in a minute have got years of practice. But yeah, in a moment, you can make shifts. Now, for me, it wasn't a moment because I've been working on myself, you know, really most of my life. Right. So the how long depends. How much emotional flexibility do you have? What kind of wiring were you born with? What were the traumas that you had? How motivated are you? Right. How far do you want to go? Yeah. So somebody may say, wow, like this is great. And I may look at it for me and say, that's a little step because of where I want to go. I've had people in the same group say to me, wow, this is phenomenal. Look what I just did. And someone else at the same time is saying, okay, what do I do next? Yeah. So that's an interesting question to me, and a really important one, because we have to honor, who we are.
Yeah.
And so it can happen in a moment. I've seen amazing things with homeopathy where you kind of get a glimpse. You can't usually sustain it, but I've seen glimpses of healing that are phenomenal. You've got to have a foundation. You've got to heal the trauma. So those things generally, if you want to really be that other person, if you really want to have that other state, hang on. And if and I don't mean like hang on, because you're going to continue to evolve and your states are fluid. So you could get changes in the moment, but that deep default, I'm really the person who now can have a business that is way more successful, or I can be a healthy person. That's when I really have struggled with and continue to. It's like the identity of somebody. I was the kid who didn't do gym. I was the kid who couldn't. It's like to change that identity. My mother never said to me, you might get cancer. She always said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
From your family programming. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many doctors have told me I had cancer.
Yeah.
When I didn't. My mother said, I would get it. You got cancer. No, I don't. Wow. So it's pretty powerful.
So how is the ego involved in all this then? Because what you're talking about is dissolving. Basically, you have identity death, right? Mm-hmm. So people are attached to their ego. Mm-hmm. And so is there an egoistic battle going on, or are you just dissolving it?
There's totally an egoistic battle. And one of the things that I do is I suggest awareness of the battle. Okay. But I don't suggest battle. I suggest really a partnership. We're never going to get rid of the ego. We don't want to get rid of the ego. We want the ego to serve us instead of be disserving to us. And so that's what it is. So much of us, of our experience, because of the traumas, because of the limitations, because of what life is, an opportunity to grow. Yeah. It is that dance between ego and, something bigger, between unconscious and conscious. So I don't want to say destroy it, but I do say that resistance, when people don't honor it, they're not honoring that it really is a fight for your life, that it's a constant dying and dying and dying to become that new you that is going to accomplish the bigger purpose.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, I don't know if we I don't know if we went into depth on this, but basically you say that there's a silent epidemic going on. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, people shut down, disconnect, and we've talked a little bit about this, but there's a subtle suicide going on. Mm-hmm. And so first off, what is subtle suicide? Would that be like a smoker, someone who smokes and they know they're killing themselves? Or
no, it's actually even more subtle. It could be, but it's more subtle than that. So, people identify suicide. We know people that are suicidal, and we look at somebody who's smoking and we say, that's suicide. What are they doing? They're trying to kill themselves, right? We watch somebody who's, obese, and we might say the same thing. But it gets much more subtle. It's the place where you kind of know, but you're not eating so great. Or it's the place where you're not breathing and your body is kind of going like this. The place where you're not living fully, you're not present, you're not engaged. And so, if you're not living fully, you're dying. If you're not living fully, you're dying. I mean, to me, when we talk about healing, for example, people have a lot of definitions. Mine is that healing is about shattering limitations instead of creating them.
Yes.
Okay, shattering them and not creating them. And healing is a step to transformation. So when we're stuck in this subtle suicide, we really are creating those little deaths. We're disengaged, we're disconnected. Yeah. And people don't even necessarily, because of that hypnosis, we don't even notice it. We're in our trance, we don't notice it. Yeah. And it's pervasive. It's like, it's one of the interesting things, like the phone, right? We've got our phones and people know. Look, we know that 5G is causing issues, and yet we're kind of doing it. So is that subtle? That's kind of subtle suicide. And we have phones. We can't move out of these areas. Most of us are not going to pick up and relocate. Right. But basically, to me, the subtle suicide are the ways that we're isolating ourselves, that we're plugging in, but we're putting kind of poison into the circuit. Right. And nobody is looking at it. So it's the ways that you don't notice, the ways where somebody is obviously doing, a diabetic that's eating a lot of sugar. We can look at that and say, what are you trying to do? Kill yourself? Yeah. But the person who is overworking just a little bit, we're meant to be in a state of excitation and recharge.
Right.
And what's happening is that most of us are walking around, we're either hyped, we're numbed, we're not in that state of recharge. And
Yeah.
so when we don't go into that state, we don't have that equilibrium in our nervous system.
Yes.
We are subtly killing ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
it's happening. If you look at the suicide rates are going up, but so are the rates of death. Okay, earlier death. We're
Yep.
not living longer. We're having more heart attacks. We're having more all kinds of these illnesses. And we can point to some concrete things and say our food supply is contaminated, our water is contaminated. You know, there are huge stresses, financial stresses, but it's the way we respond to the traumas. And
Yeah.
it's the way we shut down.
And
So
ultimately, it's our responsibility.
ultimately, it's our responsibility. And I love what you said before. It's about our obligation, because we are killing ourselves off, which means that when we don't breathe, when we don't take responsibility for our state, when we're just in this shutdown. So if you're not healing and growing, you're stagnating and you're dying. If
Yeah.
you're not living to create, to be on purpose, to live from infinite possibility, you're literally living in contraction. I had somebody talk the other day. I was listening to a talk on trauma, and they were saying, it was Stephen Borges, and he was saying that when you look at your phone, he said, you know, we used to have conversation in person. Then we had the phone, so we still had the voice. Then we had email, so we had a little more words. Now we have text. He said, well, when you're doing it on your phone, your field of vision is narrowed in.
Mm-hmm.
So actually your body is contracting, and it's harder to interpret or have that openness and more space for the other person. And we tend to see it like that. So we're walking around in numb, in fight or flight, in contracted spaces.
Yep.
And if we don't want to kill ourselves off, and really, you know, people are talking about the planet and environment, and that's great. But what about what we're doing in, you know, if we're not here, you know, save the planet, what if we're not here? What if we're pulling ourselves off and it goes younger and younger, or make life, I think that way more people, to be honest, I've studied a lot recently about suicide with the, you know, it's so much more prevalent. It's up about 33% since 1999. And I've talked to a lot of, crazy numbers in the United States. And so I ask people about that. And I've done some research with different professions. And one of the things I've asked is, have you thought, how many people have thought about suicide? And the numbers that I'm getting, they're not anything to give you a statistic, but they're staggering.
Yeah.
And the other number that's staggering to me is the number of people that say, I'm done. If not, I'm done, like I've accomplished everything I'm here to accomplish, but you know, this is no fun.
Yeah.
I'm not loving life. And if I wasn't here, it wouldn't be so bad. It would be okay with me. So to me, we've got a clear epidemic of suicide rate that we know about, but we've got an epidemic that is more pervasive and equally disturbing. So I'm on this mission to help people change that and change the planet in that way by really getting rid of those perceived limits, mastering your state, being connected so that you're fully alive.
Right.
If you're not fully alive, you really are subtly suiciding.
Yeah.
And people feel dead. If you talk to people, if you look at them, walk the streets and see how many people look dead.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, both you and I lived in New York City for a long time. You walk around and you see a lot of Walking Dead. And I can identify it because I can see it in people because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been there. And sometimes I retreat back to that person. But I've had somebody call me out on it. And I know what it feels like. And I know what the inverse of that feels like. I know what the opposite feels like. And so, it's. I'm glad you brought this up.
When we're in a depression trance or an addict trance or, you know, super anxiety trance, those are those trances, and people are walking around in them. So we do have this epidemic, and it's not just in the cities. I'm living kind of in the cross between, you know, the burbs and the country now, and people are disconnected.
Yes,
they're dreadfully disconnected, and they think it's normal. Much as that doctor that said to me, "Go get well, and then we'll kind of cut you open." People are walking around, and they're taking the disconnection with their children, with their friends, as the way it is.
Yes.
And this is very concerning. I mean, to say it's concerning is an understatement, because we're accepting disconnection as the norm instead of disconnection as something that is literally killing us.
Yes. And I want to just give a story for the listeners real quick that I heard, which was that in England, they would have these low-income housing, and they would have a center in the middle of the low-income housing And during the weekends, it was packed and everybody was playing soccer and associating with each other and having fun. And then they were all given TVs by the government.
Wow.
The next weekend, that was the end of the
Wow.
socialization, the end of connection. And so one of the things that has helped me is I don't have cable.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And which is a for you talking about your state is a hypnotic
Definitely.
driver, correct?
Definitely a hypnotic driver. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things is that I may turn off my TV. You may, not get your TV. A lot of people won't give it up. But what they will do, one of the things that I find is the most powerful is if you talk about not only how you kind of point them into how dead they are, but if you point to their children, if you point to their pets, okay, pets are one of those doorways in our animals where our state is so different. It's to really help people remember the reason to change their state, because most people are not putting down those phones or not putting them down for long. Yeah. So it's like, how am I going to stay present in the face of I went to dinner and everybody had their phones out? Yes. How am I going to stay present? How am I going to live fully? So I think it's an amazing story. Yeah, an amazing story. And I think it's something we have to take responsibility and help each other, not push each other, not bombard each other. I think we do too much of, look at, if you're online, it's like the us and them. And we don't want to make another division. Right. Those of us who are awakened and those of us who aren't.
We don't need any more outrage.
Yeah, we don't need any more outrage. We don't need any more separation. What we need is that we need to walk the talk. We need to take, people say the change starts with you. It's like we need to change us. And then start making a welcoming place for people to join us in.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Dr. K, we're at the bottom of the hour. Is there any last words that you want to tell our viewers or anything else that you want to say before we end this?
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, thank you for being here with us. This is so important. I love sharing it. I want to thank you, Ian. And if anybody feels like this is something that speaks to them, go to my website. It's drkazlow.com. I'm actually taking names from people who want to be in our fall Master Your State workshops. And I have some that are specifically for entrepreneurs, thought leaders, people who want to apply it to their business, and then some especially for people who are wanting to take control of their state and affect their families and their relationships and fulfill their purpose, not about business, but about making their own difference, whatever that is. Yes. We have some groups specially for that. So this is huge.
So and can they get that info on your website?
Yeah, they can get that information. And the best thing, send me an email. Tell me what, let's connect. Okay, I am somebody who wants to connect. Email me, drk@drkazlow.com. Message me.
And you're also on
especially
LinkedIn.
Especially if you're somebody who works with other people. I mean, we all, I don't know if you ever heard the study that the biggest factor that affects our longevity is the number of people we see in person every day.
Yes.
So let's connect. And if you work with people, let's really talk about what can be done, how you can really make this difference and be more effective in everything you're doing. You start to say something, Ian.
Beautiful. Well, you can also be found at LinkedIn at Dr. Fern Kazlow, Twitter at Dr. Fern Kazlow, and Facebook, Dr. Kazlow.
Correct.
So so they can go to your website. We'll have the links here, and then you can follow up with her on social media as well. And this has been amazing. And it's been really enjoyable. I appreciate it. So thank you for joining us on the Healing Mastery Summit.
Thank you for this interview, and thank you everybody for joining us and listening. And I look forward to hearing questions, feedback, just what this might have inspired in you and your next steps.
Great. Thank you, Dr. K.
Thank you, Ian.
Appreciate it.